And we are live. My name's JP Berg, and this is Dumb the Wiser. Today, as you could see, we have a special guest, Miss Kaysha Richardson, joining us. How are you doing, my dear?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm very good. It's a pleasure to have you. I had two conversations with your father, very wise man, and he recommended me speaking to you. So I'm very much looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
So today, as we discuss as I discuss with your father, we're going to be touching upon feminism and potential solutions for it, because it's like we were chatting a bit before the broadcast begun, and it's like I said, when you even mention that topic in any critical regard, women's heads seemingly explode. They right away,
Yeah.
like it's kind of amazing at how averse of a reaction they have from just bringing the topic up. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that a lot of women have for sure been lied to, and they don't have, I think it starts in the home. You need to have a good father in your home to kind of make it make sense to you why certain things are important, certain principles and foundational beliefs. And a father teaches you that in experience and in action, because obviously your mother is the first person that you bond with because you're growing in the womb, and it's a very intimate and personal connection because like you're there for 9 months, but the father is the first man that you learn to trust and respect and admire and look up to. And that relationship with a woman is going to kind of determine her outlook on a lot of those things. So there's a lot of connections and circumstances to life that women just don't understand if they don't have a father that taught them, or maybe if they grew up in a home where the maybe the mother was a little bit more feminist and the father kind of like stepped back for peace sake. A lot of men do that, unfortunately. And so they don't actually get to see the real value of what a man brings to their life and why. And they end up just looking at surface level things, which is really unfortunate because they end up screwing themselves in the long run. And that's never good. But it comes down to the men in their life. Without that, because women don't have the agency of men. We don't think like men were different. Men and women are different. So
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think these are foundational for children. When you look at like any psychological literature, it's the relationship with the mother and the son. That's where a lot of problems lie, and vice versa, right? The way the daughters relate to their fathers, and I mean the family is one of the biggest things that are attacked by this modern conception of feminism, and then it has the effect of creating almost like a perpetual or positive feedback loop, because the more the family is attacked and the higher single motherhood rates are, the more it kind of is kind of accepted by these people. So I mean, it's really having a degenerative effect overall on our society. What would you say would be the best way? Because, like I mentioned, women's heads explode when you start to criticize feminism, especially as a man. Now, you definitely have an edge being female yourself, but what would actually be an efficacious regard just to kind of bring this topic up and start to expose some of the flaws with feminism?
well, I mean, you mentioned the family, and it's really circumstantial to the individualistic people that you are speaking to, because obviously they have different needs, they have different experiences, and that's why it's important to be educated on where these ideas come from and why, and the consequences of these things and the circumstances by which they happen, because then when you come across the varying degree of people, then you can have a conversation that relates to them in a personal way that can make it make sense. um Now, unfortunately, though, for women, uh, a woman really won't listen to a man unless she wants to sleep with him. And I think that's actually a good thing. That's the way things are supposed to be, because God didn't actually make women to listen to every Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street. We'd be in a lot of problems. In fact, a lot of people are in problems because they listen to every Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street. Like, they won't, not on the street, but they'll listen to every man in the workplace, in their church, or whatever, but they won't listen to their husband. So, like therapists and all these things, but never their husband. And that gives them a lot of problems. But if they look at the foundational belief of feminism, if you look at Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Amelia Bloomer, Annie Besant, like Gerda Lerner, first wave feminist women who actually wrote the woman's Bible, they said that they had to break down the structure of family so that they can move forward with their feminist belief. They wrote their own Bible. It's called the Woman's Bible, like I said, and they wanted to remove men from the home. They said that the serpent in the garden, the devil himself, Lucifer, would deliver them from man and God, and that, they believed in the as above, so below, like the Baphomet. And they had a lot of beliefs that were in line with Aleister Crowley and literal Nazis. They wore the Nazi symbol, the swastika. And whether people believe what happened or not was real, they liked the idea of what happened and wanted to push it like a eugenics. They were eugenicists as well, and they wanted to do this to men, to people who were disabled. It didn't matter what color you were. They had a lot of beliefs that were in line with spiritualism from India. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky spent a lot of time there. She was like either Russian or Ukrainian heir, and they were theosophists, so they believed in literal witchcraft. And they outline a lot of this in the foundational principles of their woman's Bible, and even planning for conception, to control conception, so like birth control. They also had plans for the sexual revolution, and even trans ideology, because they believed in gender fluidity. Actually, women started wearing pants for the first time in history anywhere because of Amelia Bloomer, who was friends with all of the first wave feminists. They were kind of like their own group of people there, and they called them the Bloomer pants, which they wore under their skirts and dresses until they kept inching up. And there was a lot of health reasons why people didn't do things back then, like women in particular, because of the different ways it would affect your extremities, like wrists, your neck and your stomach and legs and things not being exposed, because they don't have the same protection that your face does. So there's a whole array of things, but the average man telling this to a woman isn't going to matter at all to her, because women are actually meant biologically and biblically to be loyal to their God, their father, and their future husband. And they can only learn to cooperate that way with their father growing up, because he's going to teach her through his experience with her, and also watching the relationship of how he treats women, of how she should be able to reasonably interact with a man. Or else, single mother homes would have been producing women who have the best relationships with men, and they can't, because women don't think like men. We don't have the agency of men. And so until a man comes along, if a woman doesn't have an actual father in her life, God forbid, but it happens a lot, unless a man comes along and has the patience for whatever reason to teach her and, be gentle with her and lead her, and has the willing spirit, a lot of this stuff isn't going to work coming from a man. But if a woman sees another woman doing it, she understands a woman, like inherently. Like she can look at her and be like, you know what, I see the experience of what that woman's going through. I don't understand these aspects, but I like it. But how did she do it? And she'll listen to a woman because they can share a bonded experience. However, she'll understand that if she wants that, she has to acquire what she has, and she'll have to do the work to do it. And then she'll be more motivated to do it.
Makes sense to me. So before I continue, I just want to appeal to everyone who's watching. If you guys could share this on whatever platform you're utilizing to watch it, it's very advantageous for us. Topics like this are very much deboosted, so it helps a lot. So I'm aware of this female, the woman's Bible, and I'm aware of some of the theosophical origins of it, not to your expertise, but it's recasting Eve as being the great liberator, as the heroine of the story, right? And it's kind of shocking when you realize how anti-biblical that message really is, right? Like that was the foundational thing that occurred that really put man in his fallen state, was that one seminal event. And that's being recast as like this great thing. And it's kind of an antithesis of Christianity in some regard.
Yeah, they make a lot of statements in the Bible, actually, in their woman's Bible, talking about how God made a mistake with man and made a mistake by making woman submit to man, but woman in the garden realized, her own, like, pretty much, I'm paraphrasing, but like just realized her own greatness or whatever. And so then she put herself above God, but she's the victim at the same time. Like the mental gymnastics in the woman's Bible, I actually wouldn't suggest people to go through and read the whole thing, because that's crazy. You can look up like the quotes from them or whatever. It's hard to find. You got to dig, because obviously the algorithm is going to crush it out. They don't want you to find that stuff. But they did kind of imply that women were the victim and above God and self, which is the as above so below kind of mentality. That's where they started with that, with the androgynous kind of genderless, idea that, that is what brought them up above. But you're right, it was Adam. The Bible says that sin entered the world through Adam. So it says that Eve was deceived and that Adam chose, and that sin entered the world through Adam. And actually, their eyes weren't open to the fact that they were unclothed until Adam actually sinned, which says a lot because it shows that he understood the circumstances. And God created Adam in the Garden of Eden first and gave him his purpose and his work, helping, and actually allowed him to be a part of the creation process by naming everything in the garden. And that's a lot. Like, if you really think about it, that's a lot. It's not just like 5 animals, like everything is everything, right? And so he understood everything in depth, and it shows that she would have wandered away from him, because no man is going to stand next to his wife and let someone violate his wife in front of his face. Because if the serpent was there in front of Adam talking to his wife that way, Adam would have been like, wait a minute, I named you and you weren't talking when I named you. And there's no, if he sat there and let that happen, that means Adam would have been a predator. And that's not the case at all, because when Eve went and told him about it, it says after she went and brought the fruit to him, whatever fruit it was, he ended up, doing that. And when they actually, the way that they outlined the circumstances to God, when God asked them, wagwan, they were, Eve was like, oh, the serpent in the garden. And then Adam was like, the wife you gave me. So then Adam blamed God, and it was like, God was like, I beg your pardon. So it's like, it shows the varying degree of capacity that they had. Like, Eve was thinking like on a very surface level of what she saw in front of her face, and Adam knew the consequences of what God told him, and he tried to blame God to get them both out of the consequences, and God was like, absolutely not. So you're right, it does show that men actually do have the headship and authority, and they also have the highest responsibility.
It's kind of funny too when you think of it. Like, the first thing man did was try to blame his wife, essentially, and then blaming God for providing, like blaming, and people don't realize, like, there's like secularism is so pervasive in modernity that people don't realize the depth of these stories. And there's so many people that think themselves so wise, and they have zero knowledge of Old Testament or New. And they just, it's like you're nowhere until you understand the relevance of these stories as they relate to us experientially, especially. Even if you take, like, if you are secular, just like the wisdom that's embedded in these stories, it's kind of phenomenal. But something else I wanted to mention, and we've seen this just with all the things at once, because feminism being a root of a lot of the degeneracy in our society, I agree with that. But then you've seen it kind of merge with some of the things that occurred in the 1960s, like the relevance of critical theory, like Marcusean critical theory, where it's like, now it's not just, it's casting man and woman against one another. Man is the oppressor and woman is the oppressed. And it's this liberation spirit. We have to liberate women. So it's women's liberation. And that just, for me, that correlates directly to the original story. Like, it was a liberation thing. Oh, if you eat this apple, you will be like God. You know what I mean? It was that temptation for liberation seems to be at the heart of a lot of our problems.
Yeah, and it was her desire to know. It was her desire to have that knowledge. And like, she should have gone to her husband, honestly, and asked him, because he had the circumstantial awareness, and he would have been able to tell her, hey, that's not what's going on. And, to a certain degree, it's probably a way that God could have fixed something if Adam didn't sin. We don't know how that would have gone at all, but the Bible does say that sin entered the world through Adam and not Eve. And it's actually worse, because Adam blamed God. He said, the woman you gave me, which means that God set him up for failure from the jump. And instead of taking accountability, which was really wrong. So in a way, he tried to save his wife and himself by blaming God, which is, justifying the devil. And I don't think they even realized what they were saying when they did that, because they were so engulfed in their own selfishness, or their lack of accountability. They were actually calling God a predator. And that's actually what the woman's Bible ends up doing. They actually call God a predator by and saying that the devil is the one that is the good guy, and that God himself is this evil, nefarious mastermind out to seek and, like, just destroy, like, the benefit of whatever women were trying to do from the jump. And that's not the case at all. But Yeah, it is a way that things are being pitted against each other a lot right now in society. It's been like that for a very long time because family is actually the completion of God. Like in the Bible, my father, taught me this, like, growing up, and we talk about this a lot on our podcast, where God, the very last thing he did before he rested in creation was marry Adam and Eve. Like Adam, after he was done helping God by naming everything in the garden, he looked around and saw everybody had someone, and he realized something was missing, right? And then God was like, okay, I'm going to make a helpmeet for you. And the word helpmeet is actually ezer or something in Hebrew. Someone sent this to me the other day, which is actually a godly form of strength and help that you cannot get anywhere else. That is actually supposed to be a lifeline help to you. That it's not just, not just something that you get from anybody. Like this is like a life and death kind of help. And it's used with God in the Old Testament, like I think 20 something times, and it's supposed to be like the highest form of, like, one of the highest forms of spiritual help. But anyway, he made the helpmeet for him, and that was supposed to be that represents the completion of God. And then he rested after that, because that union is like literally what he is to us. Like we are married. God said he's married to the church. So, you know, when we have a family, we have a better understanding of who God is in our lives and for other people, and we're able to give that to our children, our future children. Obviously, I don't have any right now, but that's why the devil wants to destroy it so much. And I think that it speaks wonders that that was the very last thing that God did before he rested. I think that's yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, it's very anti-human it's very pernicious and anti-human when you get into it. And there's no way. It's like I say, I think if more people were actually receiving some of this information or just taking this to its logical end, they would like kind of see some of the problems with it in and of itself. But it's funny, just to touch on something of what you were saying. I've heard Jordan Peterson reference this. There's some kind of Greek concept for marriage being relative to a beneficial adversary. So the masculine and the feminine naturally complement one another,
Yeah.
and they become better for being together. That
Yes.
they become the whole, and that's how alienated, that's how lost we are in the modern era. It's like we see each other as adversaries as
Yeah.
opposed to the absolute necessary component for fullness of life, and in a to perpetuate or propagate the species too. I mean, just from an evolutionary standpoint, like it's kind of wild. I watched Brett Weinstein and his wife sit down to touch upon this because young people, young men and young women have never been more alienated from one another. You could really see
Yeah.
this in the young people. It's like it's gotten to its eventual end where you're seeing one thing that makes me a little hopeful is you're starting to see young people rebel against this and embrace more traditional cultures. Or is this something you're noticing with people?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, like I said, it takes the foundation, and that's why I feel really bad for um homes that are fatherless or just broken. And it because you're set up for failure in such a bad way. Like the Bible, that's why the Bible says in Isaiah 68 for us to help the fatherless, the widow, and the oppressed, because those are the people that go around in society doing the worst damage because they don't have that guidance and leadership. They don't have the boundaries that they need or the circumstantial awareness. They don't have the tools to succeed. And it's very frustrating. Like it's heartbreaking to watch. And especially as a woman, like men can go out and do things that women can't, like, because I've seen little boys. There's a video of a little boy on the internet somewhere, and he made a song talking about how, like, he was fatherless pretty much, but he was talking about his mom in the song, and he outlined the circumstances as to why he was suffering. And he was like, pretty much, he didn't blame his mother. He identified that it was because he didn't have a father, and for that reason he's like, I'm going to make my father God and Christ, and that coming into my life will give me what I need to fix this issue. This boy was 12. I've never in my life seen a girl of any age, a woman, a grown woman even, be like, even if they have Christianity, even if they have God in their life, they don't have this circumstantial understanding of life the way that men do. So men can look at things, and men, like other men, and like just the horrors of life and war, and they're going to be like, okay, I understand what's going on, I have these principles and foundations, I can apply them and I can fix it. Women aren't like that. They're not like, they're crippled by these situations because their emotions like take over them and they can't function because of that. And that's just how they're built, because they're not built to do, war type stuff or be out in like the work competing with other men the way that men are. And so it puts them at a severe disadvantage. But if you have like a child, especially a woman that doesn't have a father growing up, then she's at the mercy of, literal luck. Like a lot of women, they think that if they come across a good guy, it's because they outwitted him and they were smarter, or they just won the game, the chess match. But that's not actually the case. It's the fact that the guy just chose to be a good man and he chose to respect you, because in any case, she would have been screwed, or else women wouldn't be constantly getting literally raped and trafficked, like, across the board, because they'd just be outwitting men and they would be bending them over in every facet of society, and they wouldn't need to beg them for rights. They would just force their hand by creating the circumstances to make things happen, and they don't do that. So, women need men, but they're not going to listen to a man that's not personal to them as a father, or that's not personal to them like a romantic interest, because they have no reason to. They have no reason to believe you, and it's offensive because they're like, why are you trying to come and control me? You don't know me. I don't know you, and I don't want to. And it's a good thing, like I said before, because otherwise they would never be loyal to the men in their life.
So the answer essentially is kind of to affect culture, to let young people understand this in a real way, using examples, right? It's like I say, Pandora can't be forced back in the box, but we could potentially provide very good arguments. You know what I mean, for the return to the box.
Yeah.
But again, it's like I said, even me now, I'm 42 years old, and I've had 42 years of like conditioning from society. And I know, I believe as you do, sincerely, there's nothing you said that I'm in opposition to. But still, relative to that conditioning, that societal conditioning I've had, I'm anticipating what a lot of modern women would think of right away when they heard what you're saying. And as much as I agree with it, I'm having that reaction like, ooh, that's like, I imagine women, I doubt I have a lot of women viewership, honestly, but I imagine the women watching this are like, oh my God, like that just goes so much against everything
What
that
I've
I
learned.
have been taught. Yeah.
Well, you know what? And you said before, that men and women, their masculinity and femininity is supposed to be such like a complement to each other, and that's the truth wholeheartedly. Like a lot of women, I think they're offended because they've been told the solution is something else, when a lot of the solution to women's problems is a man. Like, and that sounds very like cliche to say, but it's the absolute truth. Like a lot of women, they'll be sad about like being traumatized over something, but men are there to literally see problems, assess risk, mitigate it, and fix it. And that's including with their wife, with their children. The children, when they grow up and they meet people, the fathers are supposed to like mitigate the risk of those bad people trying to come around them and try and help them find a suitable match that will do the same for them and help them with the necessary horrors and problems of life, or else you're not capable to have a family. And that's what the man's role is. It's not just money and, six pack, 6 figures, 6 inches, 6, feet or whatever. It's his ability to create circumstances for the success of the family. And a lot of things that women are outsourcing to other men, that's really all that feminism really did. It got women to outsource all the things that they should get from their husband, from other men in society, be it like, someone in the workplace, a coworker, a best friend, a therapist, or whatever. A man that loves you is going to see you for who you are. He's going to, watch the behaviors. I don't know how men do it like internally. I'm just saying, like, from my experience, understanding who you are and then taking the necessary steps, whatever way he chooses to do that with you, to actually help you fix those problems. Like, I understand being, a survivor of trafficking and domestic violence and all these things, like the worst things that you possibly think of. And some of my married friends that I had, they were like, oh, Kaysha, like, you have to stop thinking like this or stop doing this. I'm like, you're telling me the outcome, but you're not telling me how. And that's the problem. And they were women. And of course, they didn't understand because they don't understand how their husband was even doing that for them, because they also had a little bit of feminist ideologies. But once I came across a man who I actually fell in love with and, was quite genuine with, I started to see how all of these things started to get fixed, because a man who loves you is going to help you grow as a person. They're going to care about your best interest, and they're going to do whatever they can to push you beyond the point that you're at. They're not just going to be there to just let you suffer. And a lot of women wouldn't have to do as much in all these different areas to drain themselves if they just found a capable man that was willing to help them be the best that they can, and that would help her give back to him. And it's like it's a circulating thing, you know. Like you said, the masculinity and the femininity, they're completely complementary to each other, and they need each other. It is a lifeline. It is.
I agree entirely. And where you said a capable man, I would even go a bit further and say good man.
Yes.
And good men are very rare because
Yes.
men think that being good, they don't even know what masculinity is. There's hyper masculinity you see in some individuals, like Andrew Tate, for instance. Like I don't think that's it. That's like something that came about and gained popularity relative to masculine deprivation. I think a good man has the order, knows that his job is to provide. And as you said, like a woman needs man, like she doesn't know, like realize how much she needs a man. I think the same thing is going on with young men. They don't realize how much they need the woman and the family to be responsible for. It's like a Johnny Cash song, very masculine songwriter from a different era. And he had a lyric. It was actually the title of the song. And it was because you're mine, I walk the line. And the premise of the song was like, you know, if I didn't have you, I would probably fall to sin. I would fall to worse ways. Like men need something to be responsible for. Men need
Yeah.
something to actually be masculine for. And until we can bring these two forces back together, we're going to see more. We're going to see Western culture degenerate further because, thankfully, in other cultures, you don't see this feminist thing. It's very unique to Western culture. It grew out of a lot of liberal traditions, and I mean, to top it off, it's like it's it's really having this immense detrimental effect, and people don't know the first thing about it. It's like that's the common thing I'm kind of theme I'm reiterating through the conversation is like once you start to criticize feminism or some of the aspects of it, or actually explain some of the inevitable repercussions of this ideology, people just shut it off. So again, the way would be to affect the culture, but I'm not really seeing that so much. I mean, you see some like traditional Christian movements, trad Catholics, you see different things like that. I think it's a step in the right direction, but you're not seeing it on the big stage. And unfortunately, like the big stage is controlled. These algorithms are controlled. We were talking a bit prior to the broadcast, and it's like you're flicking through TikTok and you're seeing perversion and degeneracy. You're not seeing any education of any kind. And I mean, that's having such a kind of perpetuating effect on all of this degeneracy.
Yeah, you mentioned I like what you said there about men need like the responsibility, they need something to care about, and they need to actually not just be capable, but they need to be good and actually be able to do good things. And what you said about Andrew Tate, the thing is, we obviously he's not a Christian, so we don't agree with everything that he does, because he's coming from a Muslim point of view, and so he's naturally going to do things that are in opposition to Christianity. That being said, though, I think that the actions of someone should be looked at, not just the choices they made in certain situations, like the overall actions. Because when I was in the U.S., and my father and I talk about this sometimes because we do hear a lot from people, and I can only speak from my personal experience. But when I was in the U.S. and I was being trafficked, I had someone that came to grab me with a machete, duct tape, rope, paraphernalia, like an abused pit bull that later put me in the hospital. And I posted about my situation, about what happened to me. These people were going to kill me. The lady ended up getting arrested, and the man, I don't know what happened to him, but he posted about, like, he reposted that video of what happened to me, and not anybody, this was years ago, and not anybody else would. And it's like I was asking myself, where are all the good Christian men that are willing to do something and say something about this man is a Muslim, and he's come out and done something. And the people in his circle ended up helping me, like one of his friends, I guess he does business with, he ended up taking on my case. He's a lawyer when I was in the US, because ICE was hunting me down illegally, because I'm indigenous, like I'm a native, so American Indian on both sides of the border under the Jay Treaty. And they helped get those people off my back. They were threatening to send me to a third country that I'd never been before. I still have all the stuff from that. So it's like, there's a lot that we don't agree with from certain people, but I think the overall actions of what those people do is important. And I know people around them that are very genuine. And I think that there's a lot that Christians could be doing and having the courage to do, and they're not. And it really makes me sad. You know what I mean? Because like you said, there needs to be good men in the world doing things and solving problems. And there is a lot of feminism in the West, but unfortunately, there's a lot of feminism in the West because Christianity is not, the Christian men are not doing their jobs, not enough of them. And everybody is afraid to address the problem of what it truly is. And it's the fact that men are not leading, and women, they're giving the position over to women for whatever reason. Like everyone will talk about big pharma, they'll say big Jew or big whatever, but they'll never talk about big women. I mean, like they talk about big women, but not like in that sense where they're like, you know what, we need to get women off this pedestal and we need to deal with it. And to a certain degree, that's why my father says that's why people like Andrew even get the platform, because even though he's a Muslim, he is identifying so many of these issues that we in the West are afraid to talk about and deal with. And that's an embarrassment and a stain on us as Christians. Now, the people who are doing it, kind of like you, my father, people like us, we get censored so much because if people saw that there was Christians like us doing it, they'd be like, you know what, this makes sense. And it's Christianity. I can understand this. And I'm willing to take this solution because it works. But that's not what's happening. In fact, I think the more that you actually are like this, the more that society does everything that they can to completely take you out, because so much of our society is functioning on predators stringing women along to get whatever they want, because the predatory men cannot attack other men straightforward, so they're going to go through the women and the children and make them believe that they have the position so they can get whatever they want in all these avenues, which is why Isaiah in the Bible also says the worst part of society, your most embarrassing point of society and shameful, is when women and children are running it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. So I think one of the reasons you see men from Islam in Islam in Islamic cultures, masculinity has not been vilified. In Christian cultures, it's been attacked by like a subversion campaign coming
Yep.
from feminism and other avenues of attack. But I
Yes.
mean, with Tate, I agree with 70% of the things he says, and then 30% it almost makes me cringe a little bit. But it's not like I don't vilify him. I understand things are complex, and you got to
Yep.
kind of separate the wheat from the chaff with people. But I do think it's interesting with his emergence and popularity. I think it's because of the masculinity deprivation young men are feeling. I'm telling you, I see a lot of young men. I'm a working class guy, and I work with a lot of young men, and they don't even stand up straight. They look defeated. Men in their 20s now, they're seemingly more effeminate. Like you're actually seeing this get to this point now where it's really starting. They say it's a biblical concept. You will know them by their fruit. You will know us by our fruit. And I mean, the children have never been more alienated from one another and what it means to be a man and a woman. And I think that I mean, a lot of young people don't realize too how new this was. People have been around for thousands and thousands of years. And I mean, feminism has only been around for 2 generations, 3 generations, you know what I mean? Like, and it really didn't see a massive surge until the 1960s and even the late 60s. So, I mean, I think in every way, it's been an abject failure. I think it's hurt women, it's hurt men, and I'd love to start to see this turn around in Western culture. But that's the difference between Muslims and Christians is in Christian countries, there's been a subversion campaign to vilify masculinity and present it as being toxic to the point now where young men don't even know what it is. They think it means being hyper aggressive and driving a sports car and sleeping with a lot of women. And I mean, from a Christian standpoint, that is not masculinity. That's adolescence. So I mean, it's really confusing a lot of people. So it's a massive problem.
Yeah, and I will say that, I this is why I try to look at the circumstances of people, because I understand what it's like to be persecuted to the highest degree, and the level of persecution my father and I have gone through, most people would end like they would kill themselves for, and or they wouldn't be able to even stand the scrutiny. They would have died, or they would have offed themselves. And I understand when people go through a certain level of that and they don't have Christianity, or they don't have a father like mine, they're going to be in a different position. And it's not to say anything about like the way that they're found. Their father died. Their father died when they were still quite young. So it's a little bit quiet. Uh, yeah, their father died when they were quite young, I believe. But so they had to go through life in a completely different way and figure out a lot of things for themselves, probably. But what? No. Wait, sorry. My dad is asking me about the sound, because for some reason it went low all of a sudden.
That's odd.
Uh,
Nothing
oh,
surprises me with the glitches. Is
it,
this
it
sound a little better now?
it's better now. Sorry.
No
I don't.
worries.
As like a few minutes ago, everything started going weird.
It's live.
Um.
This happens.
So yeah, I think with them, I understand their experience to a certain degree, my father and I, and it's hard to go through, and especially that level of worldwide scrutiny. I mean, we've had that kind of attacks, and I'm not justifying, saying that, certain things are not incorrect, because obviously as Christians we believe certain different things. I'm just saying, with that level of attack, you have to understand. I think we have to start understanding the position. And this is why I think the circumstances are important, because we can't actually help people find God or come to Christ if we look at everything that they do incorrectly, instead of praising the good that they do and guiding us and assisting them in the right direction. Because there's so many people, like, look at the Epstein files, and all the things that come out about that, and all these people are now scrambling, and different people in society that were like abused by that. At the end of the day, like Isaiah says in chapter 68, we're supposed to help the fatherless, the widow, and the oppressed. Because when those people go through those situations the most, like, coming out of those, like, I don't think a lot of people understand the weight of difficulty it takes to overcome the grasps of torture or persecution or sin. Like, we always just say, okay, well, you can pray to God and God will deliver you. That is also a very feminist kind of position of just, I'll pray. The Bible says faith without works is dead. And when we have so many people in situations that are praying for things, but they're not taking action, and then we're expecting people who are being beaten into the ground over and over and over again to produce an exceptional result, I think it's not only wicked, not only unfair, but it's exceptionally wicked, because God himself wouldn't do that. God gives us the blueprint of how we can do things, and he sends men to go help other men. And if we were in the position where we were as Christians going around helping the fatherless, the widow, and the oppressed, we would never be in this situation, because then even women would see the value of what men can do and what their purpose is and what our job is. Because at the end of the day, we're supposed to give people the opportunity at salvation by showing them the love of Christ. We're not there to be like, okay, well, you done this, this, and this. And it's like, in the grand scheme of things, there's only so many people, like a handful of people I can say that I really respect. And a lot of them are not even in the church, unfortunately. There's Artur Pawlowski, though. He's probably the only pastor that I found in Canada that I can really say, what, this is amazing what he's doing. And Pastor Derek Reimer, and those people. But most of the good people we're finding now have been kicked out of the church. They've been kicked out of any section of society that would really lead them in the right way. And it's my dad said the capable men are being destroyed. And it's also when it comes to spirituality as well, because they know when capable men come together and they are also under the banner of Christ, they're going to do exceptional work for the Lord. And I'm long-winded, so I'll end here. But I think that in society right now, we're seeing groups of people that we've never seen in history before, like, not in this collective way. Like, you'll see people in history like Edward Bernays, who only comes around like every 500 years. You won't, like, if we look in the last 500 years, there's only one man that was really like Edward Bernays. And if anyone wants to understand a relative kind of, comparison, not in character wise, but when the scene of Peaky Blinders where they tell Thomas Shelby, like, I've good use for men like you, Thomas Shelby, but of course there is no other man like you. There are a load of men in society today in the world that if they came together to do certain things, they would do exceptional work for society and God. But the world does so much to attack those people that they don't even get a chance to focus on God. Do you see what I'm saying? And then they're shut out from all the other people because of character assassination and because, oh, I don't like this about you, I don't like that. And so we can't put our differences aside to actually work on something greater than what we're experiencing. And it's a terrible thing, man. It's a terrible thing.
I agree, and I think one of the things we see in the West nowadays is this narrative control. Even on these so-called free speech platforms such as
Yeah.
X, I mean, they're deboosting any voice that doesn't support their narratives. If you get on either side of these dialectics and you fuel division, your stuff is boosted. Now, that could be a flaw of the algorithm. I think it's more pernicious and more direct. I think they're actually deboosting certain voices. But it's one of the biggest problems we're seeing. You mentioned there was a lot you went there. I want to go back. You mentioned kind of like the concept of a positive reinforcement. Like when you're trying to teach people, you want to point out where they're doing right, and it's more conducive to actually getting people to go along with you. Like just from an educational standpoint, positive reinforcement is crucial. One thing I've been thinking when you were speaking there is, because I notice your dad's with you, and your dad has such a prevalent role in your life. Now, I have a daughter. She's more rebellious. I don't have that kind of sway, but it's refreshing to see within Western culture, because I have a lot of friends from other parts of the world. I have a lot of Indian friends and Asian friends, and the father is still the major person. The father is still the patriarch, as much as the mother is still the matriarch. But even when they're kids, like we have this concept in the West that, oh, once your kid's 18, they're their own little independent unit. And now they don't require your guidance anymore. They're going out to live on their own. And I think that's one of the biggest flaws, because the family unit, that's everything.
Yeah.
And respect thy parents, that's thy father and thy mother. That's very biblical too. Yes. And again, you could trace, like, we could say a lot of the roots to the causational problems with the West has been feminism, but that's just an attack vortex. The real root of the problem with the West is we moved away from our religion. We moved away from our God. And that's everything. I mean, if we could see people coming back to embrace Christianity, we would see the tides turn. And that's what I think is kind of being suppressed, especially in Canada. Now, in America, thankfully, there's some large Christian communities that have a lot to say, but in Canada, it's virtually absent that.
Yeah, no. So what you said about the family, 100%. The fathers are that, like, the leaders, the protectors in the home. They are the boundary setters. They set the tone. The word husband literally means house band, to band the house together. And the women are supposed to be the support and the helpmeet, which, like I said, the Hebrew word is like ezer or ezer or something, which is the highest spiritual form of, strength and assistance, like it's and support. But a woman is not supposed to be, like, a lot of people say the husband is the head and the woman's the neck. That's not, that is the most feminist propaganda nonsense I've ever heard. That's not, God took her from the rib so that she could be beside him and in support of him, not that she can direct his steps. That's not what a woman's job is to do. She's supposed to support him in his purpose, like the Proverbs 31 woman. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, Esther wasn't anything without her father Mordecai, because he was directing her steps to do all of those things. And she would have never been with the king had it not been for him. And he even told her, you can choose not to do this, but I can't save you from the consequences of your actions. And, part of being a father, although you have the positive reinforcement, I don't know what it's like to be a man, but I do know that my father has allowed me to take a lot of consequences in life so that I could understand the repercussions of not following that guidance and leadership. And that's the same way that God teaches us to do that. So you can't really understand God properly if you don't have a good man raising you in the home, because your father is who God is supposed to be to us. That is our first representation of who God is to us. And that is why feminism is so detrimental, and why they attacked the men in the home and also God, because without that structure, we're seeing all the different ways they've gone in society and done this. And unfortunately, like I said with the Epstein files before, a lot of people are looking at outcomes. They're looking at choices. They're not like what people did, but not the choices that they had. We're looking at the situation of people and saying, oh, this, that, and the third, but not looking at the circumstances they were under or why they made those choices. Because a lot of people, when they're in these difficult situations of persecution, they're fatherless, widow, oppressed, whatever, they don't have the tools. They're not equipped to deal with certain things. And so when they come across things, a lot of people, I see people online all the time pointing fingers, oh, this person this, that person that. But if they were in the same situation, and when they fold like a lawn chair, because they don't have the tools to figure. It's like expecting a brain surgeon to be your mechanic, or your mechanic to be your brain surgeon. It's just not going to work. So it's like feminism is a result. And it's not that it's only been around for X amount of time, because Eve's decision in the Garden of Eden, I would say, was the first feminist act. And if we look at feminist societies, we'll see Jezebel and Abraham, and she was a high priestess of Baal, and her father's name was something Baal, whatever, but he raised her that way. And the society was in its most turmoil and had the most predation on children and women when Jezebel and Ahab was in power. And she would do things that not even Ahab the king would do, because he was like, I'll get consequences for this. Like, she wanted to steal man's properties and all sorts of things and kill people. And he was like, I can't do that. And she would do things that even he wouldn't do. So we're seeing the repeat of this stuff happening. And I think that's why Isaiah gives us such a strong warning about women and children leading society being our greatest shame and embarrassment and our weakest point, because that is the result of literal witchcraft and Satan worship, is what feminist is to its core, because it goes against the complete order of God and puts women and children in the most vulnerable position. But the only way to do that is by attacking men and destroying them and removing them out of the home, which I think is why men are so destroyed in society today, especially the good ones.
Yeah, I agree. I entirely agree with your take on this. You see with women too, and this is weaponized against them, is this weaponization of empathy. And women are more wired for this empathy, obviously, but you have like the Freudian model, the devouring mother. And without the man, I believe most single mothers become the devouring mother. They because you're just getting the love and the nurturing without the guidance, without the fear of the father. And as someone who grew up in a single mother household, like, I was lost as a young man. I really was. It took me a long time and a lot of really hard lessons that I learned in the hardest ways imaginable for me to truly get a conception of what masculinity is and how to be strong. That for me, I have a very unique circumstance where, and I guess it's not that unique. There's a lot of young men from single mother households, and we're not doing that great neither. And it's interesting to note the data shows that single father households, not as good as a two parent household, but they do far better than a single mother.
Almost equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
up to like almost I think up to like 87 or 88% or something like that. Yeah.
So what's more important, the nurturing and the overbearing love, or the lessons and the order and the teaching of consequences for certain actions? I mean, I think just from a developmental standpoint, that obviously kind of takes a precedence in that regard. So we got about 140 people watching. Again, I'm being very deboosted. Generally, I'll get 500 live viewers on these shows, and it's something specifically occurring with X. Now, I reshared it, the stream, but it's not getting the views that it generally does. So I will, again, very sincerely appeal to everyone. If you guys could share this, it's very advantageous for me and to get conversations like this out there. Because as we said, this is something that the algorithms definitely don't favor, for sure. I don't really have, relative to the sparse audience today, I don't really have many questions here. Do you guys got any on your side on any of the
people in the comments?
Yeah, just wondering.
I guess I'll address what you said in the meantime until they bring up some comments. You were saying about the devouring mother. The devouring mother, is that someone that's just overbearing?
Well, yeah, it's from a Freudian aspect, and believe me,
Mm.
I don't ascribe to Freudian's view of reality. But I mean, yes, it was that overbearing mother, the mother that never lets the young man learn a hard
Yeah,
lesson, that gets there and she takes care of all of his problems, and then she
yeah,
infantilizes him. It's not
yeah,
merely emasculation, it's infantilization, because
yeah,
then you just have this big, 25-year-old baby. And even worse than that, the 30-year-old baby, and that's an archetype, like, we've seen that. We see that a lot in our society, in our culture.
yeah. And, it shows the importance, I think, of the father's role being the house band, literally the husband being a house band, binding the house together, meaning there is no home for a woman to even, there's no house for a woman to make a home if a man has not built it for her to begin with. Because, if that father, the husband, he builds the foundations, and then well, the father gives a daughter, the foundations, and then another man will come and build something on the foundation that the father already built. And it makes it exceptionally easier for her to cooperate with him and do those things. If a woman doesn't have a man that's, mitigating the horrors of life for her, and she has to be like in protector or provider mode, and she's not actually doing it, she's barely surviving. She thinks she is because she's surviving, and she thinks surviving is thriving, and it's not. It puts her in a place where a lot of these women, they grab onto control like it's the oxygen they breathe, and they want to control literally every single thing that you do under the sun. It becomes suffocating. It's actually tyranny. Women become tyrants in their own home raising the kids, and because they're emotional, they actually are not good at disciplining children at all. And children actually don't even respect their mothers when it comes to discipline. They respect their fathers more, statistically speaking. Like, if you say you want to wait till your father comes home, they're going to be scared. You say you're going to wait till your mom comes home, you might feel a little bit like, okay, she's going to fly off the handle, but the consequence the father's going to give you is going to far outweigh whatever the mother is going to do. And it's not because he's like, abusive. It's just because it's going to be cemented in you, a lesson that you're not going to forget. Whereas moms, they'll come home on a random day after a hard day of work and beat the hell out of their kids sometimes, or scream and yell or whatever, because they just can't handle both of the roles together. And women are notorious for doing this because it's just not something they were built to do. Whereas a father can be running himself into the ground, have the worst day possible, come home to his kids and be like, who wants to go play at the park or go out for ice cream, or, just something, because it brings him joy, like still being able to, fix those things with his kids or whatever. So yeah, that is something that I've noticed, but we can't really expect, I think, women in society to do that by themselves, but they also have to be willing to adhere to that structure of being with a man and understanding the value that they bring. Like, and that's the problem with what you said earlier, thinking about, the six figures, like just the cars and the money or whatever being the main purpose of a man, because that's not the case at all. You can't learn from a man who just has money. You can
Mhm.
only learn from a man who has the character and the skills and whatever to teach you and lead you and guide you. And without that, you're going to be a whole mess, and your kids are going to be a mess. It's almost useless to have children at that point, because you're not really going to have a real legacy. And you need someone to give consequences more than anything. And too much discipline is definitely better than not, because you can't discipline children with love. That's actually the worst predators of society have come out of single mother households because
Mhm.
of the overbearing love or whatever. But like I said, if you make the choice, like you came out of the single mother home, his father died when he was very young, and he had to figure out a lot by himself. But it does make a difference if your father died versus if he walks out. But still, like, you still have to figure things out by yourself. And he said God helped him with that, but he made the choice to separate himself from his mother and the women in his home, so that he could put himself in hardship, so he could figure it out himself. And men are capable to do that in different ways. So
I think that happens naturally a lot, right? Just as a young man with women, and the fear factor's not there. My mother was a strong woman. She was very strong-willed. She was a good woman. She did her best. It was the absence of my father that
yeah,
really is the only thing I'm speaking to critically. But, the fear factor wasn't there. By the time I was 13, I realized there were no real repercussions for me. I did what I wanted. I became the man of the household as a young boy that didn't know shit from good chocolate, pardon the vulgarity. But I think a lot what we have too is this materialistic, like, with materialism being so prevalent with young people, that kind of leads them that way too. So they associate being masculine with being a large breadwinner. And I mean, that's an aspect of it, being a provider, but you're losing the more important aspects of the role, and that's having a
Right.
happy, healthy family.
Right.
And that's it again. It's going back to the Johnny Cash kind of philosophy. Like, if a man doesn't have that, if he doesn't have a decent woman and some children eventually, or working towards that goal, he has nothing to sustain himself. He
Right.
ends up falling off, veering off path. And especially when they're not coming from stable ground, when they're coming from single mother households, you have it creates a toxic man. And there's a lot of them. I call them, they're like little boys walking around as grown men. And you see this again. It's like we're so alienated from each other and alienated from God and a conception of God, that it's really having its effects are really being kind of manifesting in reality. Like I said, you see these young women, they're like dressing themselves up with layers of makeup to look as sexualized as they can on social media. And then you have young men that are just going in the opposite toxic way. Like it's trying to present themselves as this hyper masculine, super aggressive, and ultimately they're lost. And you're seeing a lot of effeminate men, and you're seeing a lot of masculine women. It's like, I don't know. I just from a circumstantial standpoint, I think the way it's gone so far, I think of it like almost like a pendulum. Like the pendulum has
Yeah.
been swung so far to degeneracy, and we're seeing the effect that it's having in our society, that it's naturally, it has to come back now.
Yeah, my dad says that men become more hyper, uh, like aggressive or anger or whatever when they are under the boots of women, because it's not logical. It doesn't make sense. Like everything's sporadic. Like I said, with women being tyrants in their own home, like it's all based on how they feel. There's no structure, there's no order, and men need discipline and order and structure to thrive. And if they're under, you know, like what feminism is doing to men, browbeating them, breaking them down, pretty much making them like slaves, and the lack of appreciation, also not understanding the hardship of what they have to carry and deal with, like having no respect for it whatsoever, that makes men more aggressive in that way, because it's very abusive. It's actually very abusive. And on top of the fact that the way that they're being deprived, in the relationships, be it emotionally or sexually, by their spouse, and taking this abuse at the same time with the horrors of life. I actually saw a video the other day that was talking about how men connect physically with their wives because it's love, like the respect is love to them, and it's actually healing to their body when men go out to war every day and they come home and they're able to just like hold their wife, hug them, or be intimate with them or whatever, because that's a relief of all of the literal strain on their body, and it actually helps them live longer. And
Mhm.
so women, when like they deprive men of what they need, they become more aggressive because they're being abused. And the same way women would be, like women become more masculine, or they try to be, but they're not succeeding, but they lose feminine qualities when they're running the home by themselves, be it a good woman or an awful woman, whatever. They're going to be doing a lot of mistakes because they're doing something they're not built to do. So I think, like, probably, for I'm not a man, but maybe a lot of the situation that we're watching unfold, where people are doing things in an opposition kind of way that's unnecessary, is because someone's going to be hypersensitive to something that's constantly being beaten down. Like women who are sexually abused, they are hypersensitive to sex, be it like over sexual or not at all. So you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's funny too. I was thinking as you were saying that, and it goes back to something you said earlier about women not being able to provide discipline as well as a man can. You see this where women are forced into roles that they're not naturally for, like women police officers. I
Yeah.
think they're more than twice as likely to use deadly force,
Yes.
because they can't just come in and mitigate a situation. They can't mitigate conflict as well as a man can, just being naturally more physical. Just the physicality of a big male police officer as opposed to a small woman police officer. I think it's abhorrent. Like, I know it's normalized in our society, but like there's dangerous situations, and we're sending our daughters and our
Yeah.
wives out with police uniforms on to try
Yeah.
to resolve them. That's nuts to me. And I know that that's considered a traditional or I would be called a chauvinist or something, but no, that's just realism. I mean, there's realities to the differences, and it's like I'm so tired of it. I can't wait to start hearing more conversations like this and meeting more young women such as yourself that actually understand it, because there's young men that are starting to learn the some of the problems with feminism, and they're starting to become more traditional and look back to God, look back to their religions, and they're really embracing that. But with young women, it's way more rare. I find like you're not seeing it, but again, maybe that's the dynamic. Maybe young men do it first, and the women just follow the men, right? That's how it should be, I guess.
Well, yeah, I think that that's really the case. And I agree with what you said for sure about the officers, because women, and this is why I say, like, a woman who has, the more you train a woman with weapons or force, the quicker they're going to use it. Because when women get into situations of violence or danger, or something that even stresses her out, she will instantly turn to violence. And that's not a good thing, because usually somebody, I've spoken about this before, when, like, say for example, if a woman's been attacked by a stalker, he knows you, like, he's been watching you, he knows what you're predisposed to doing, and he's prepared for you to do it. So he's banking on the fact that you're going to do your natural inclination. Women don't have the ability to read men the way that men do and assess the circumstances or the actions or the perceptions of men, which is why you'll have that, like you said, the 25-year-old boy pretty much living in the mom's house, not doing anything because she thinks she can love him into submission. Women are the same, even when they're in the workplace doing those things, because they're like, if you're not going to like do what I think is necessary in this moment, I'm just going to immediately kill. Like, women's first response in danger is just kill it. And that's not at all how you deal with situations. That's not logical. It's not safe. It's not rational or reasonable. And it puts people in problems, especially if you're a woman who's in danger. Like, we're doing a lot of cure instead of prevention. So we're saying that women should go and have like all these guns and stuff like that. I've seen female police have their guns taken by an unarmed man and then shot. Sure. And like and they're trained, and they're trained, and then like by the government, they're trained. And then the women on the street think that, for some reason they'll have a gun and they'll have a weapon, they'll be able to protect themselves, and a man will come along, attack them, and they still can't defend themselves, because that's not even the thing. The women need to start looking at prevention instead of cure, like not putting themselves in positions to begin with. Because yeah, you should be able to go out in the world and do whatever you want, but we don't live in that world anymore. Like we never have. It's never been that, and it's not gonna be. And feminism has made women believe that you can go out in society, like pretty much take your child, like know that there's predators at the park, and then take your kid to the park, at that same park, and say, don't touch my kid. Like, of course they shouldn't, but why would you go in front of a park full of predators and bring your kid and say, I have my rights? You have to have, a man wouldn't even do that. Like, they have to have protection and prevention and respect for the headship of God, your father, maybe your husband, if you have one, is going to protect you, because men understand the way that men operate. If you dress a certain way, they're going to treat you a certain way, and that doesn't mean it's correct, but that's the natural order of life. You have to protect yourself, and they wouldn't be in the position to even have to use the violence if they didn't do a lot of those things. But
yeah, it's the abnormality for sure. That was never the way it was. We knew that women shouldn't go certain places, especially scantily clad. Everyone dressed better back, even young men. But I mean, for women especially, like it's really bad. I want to speak to one point you brought up, and that's women's how they're unable to necessarily view the motivations of men. I've read something that indicates that precisely. There's a lot of young women that are actually attracted to what they call the dark triad, which is like Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. Like this is very common for young women to be attracted to that kind of detrimental, toxic male figure. And that's kind of in line with what you were saying.
Well, you know what? A lot of women who don't have, like, women have the natural biological tendency to want to be led by a man. That's like God, when in the Garden of Eden, when God was giving the punishment to Adam and Eve, he told Eve, I'm going to greatly multiply your sorrows. And he gave her 4 sorrows in Genesis 3:16. Said, you'll sorrow in conception, trying to even conceive a child, giving birth, your desire being to your husband, and him ruling over you. So women have the innate desire to have a man lead her and protect her and provide for her. And unfortunately, when we're in a society where there's a lot of men who are not, you said perhaps men lead first, and that is the case. Men are supposed to lead first. My father say that men create the boundaries, because if you have a woman who doesn't understand the action or perception or the mind or the agency of men, and that woman is leading you in boundaries, she's going to lead you into destruction, the way that Eve did with Adam
Mhm.
in the Garden of Eden, which he allowed her to. But that's the consequence of being led by a woman. So men do have to lead first and create those boundaries. And when women see that men have that capability, they're very attracted to it. However, if they don't have a father, or they decide to be rebellious and think that they can do it by themselves, because a lot of women do have good fathers, they just don't listen, maybe because they didn't see their mother do it or whatever reason. They're young and stupid. I was once too, I still am. But, sometimes you go, and in that situation, you're going to get yourself into problems. You'll have the consequences, but you need the reason they like the men who are, the maybe the dark triad or whatever, is because they're like, this guy looks like he has some power and capability and position. And it's not even the fact that he's a psychopath, it's the fact that she sees that there's something about the confidence of what
That's
he's
right.
doing that's going to lead her. Because that's why girls date guys in the street, like, that are gang banging, because a
Mhm.
lot of the good guys, unfortunately, in society today, they're very feminized, and they're too scared to do anything. Like I said, when I was in America, a lot of Christians wouldn't, like, the men wouldn't do anything to help me, like, no matter how much I would reach out. And now people, like, are saying, like, oh, it makes so much sense, all this other stuff that's been coming out, it makes so much sense what you were saying. I was like, oh, it didn't make sense back then with all the evidence I gave you. But and even when I would tell them, the people who were saying, oh, I'm too scared to talk about this, or I can't talk about this because I'll get pushback, now that it's out publicly, now they're saying that. And so a lot of women are not attracted to good men today, because the good men are not having the courage to lead them the way that they need, and actually being the saviors of society. But the bad men, because they're literally bad, they're going around doing a bunch of whatever they want. They're just like, that guy is not afraid to do whatever he wants, so I'll follow him no matter what the consequence. Because also, if she needs help and that man helps her, women, emotional help to women, like saving a woman from anything, is like seducing her. Like, I told someone this the other day, that emotional help for a woman is like a woman going naked in front of a man. And so she's going to give her loyalty to the person that puts himself in the position of only what a husband should do. And so, like, that's what's unfortunate. I think if more good men were actually taking the position, then women would gladly follow them.
I
Because when
don't
they Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I don't think a man can be a good man unless he's a strong man. I don't think a weakness lends itself to being good. I think a good man, by necessity, has to stand against things that aren't good.
Right.
And we don't
Right.
have a preponderance of good men. That's why I said that earlier. It's not,
Yeah.
I don't mean passive men. I don't mean men that are living in like, you could be a Christian and live a Christian life, but like, if you see evil and you don't
Hmm.
stand against it, you're not good.
Right.
That's just as simple as that. So weak
Right.
men can't be good. I'm a firm believer of that.
Yes, I agree. I think that's precisely the position. Like, a lot of women are really tired of um, hearing men say that they're good, and they talk all this talk and saying they want all the things of women being women, but they're not willing to take the risk. Like, a lot of
Mhm.
men are like, oh, well, I'm afraid to die. Okay, so you're going to leave the women and children to die? Like, God doesn't ask, God literally says that a man in the Bible is supposed to love as Christ loved the church, and Christ died for the church. And it's not that you're going to go out and just do something stupid and off yourself. It's just you're going to take the risk to protect what you love. And men are not going out blazing doing that anymore, and they're not will and God even says he doesn't even answer the prayers of a man who doesn't love and provide or protect for his wife and his family. He doesn't hear, his ears are closed to them. So it's like, it's unfortunate, because that in itself is part of the driving factor. And they want to, some people, it seems that they want to just say, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to do, and
Mhm.
replace genuine masculinity with money. Which is why I said, like, I don't care, like, what kind of money someone has, because you need the character. Like, Job was righteous and he lost everything, like his house in one day, his children were murdered, he was on the street with boils on his skin with his wife. His wife turned to him and said, curse God and die because obviously she's under stress. Like that shows the difference between men and women.
Mhm.
He turned to her and said, "You speak like the foolish women." And she didn't do it again. So he corrected her and she had to stay with him until God blessed them with double what they lost. And then she even had to birth double the children that they lost. So it shows, the type of relationship and loyalty that you need to have. But it came from him being a proper leader when he had everything and even when he had nothing, because he was righteous regardless. So yeah.
No, it's a great conversation. I'm really glad you came on with me. I've enjoyed it profusely. So I actually finally have a question here. As I said, my viewership is down immensely. It's some kind of glitch with X. But Peggy is a friend of mine, and I'm aware of the book she's referencing. She's wondering if you read the Rachel Wilson book on the origins of feminism.
Is that the wife of
Andrew Wilson, yes.
Andrew Wilson from the Whatever podcast? So I've actually been on the Whatever podcast. I went and talked about like some Christian values one time. I've not actually read Rachel Wilson's book. I have no idea what's in it.
She's actually it's a lot of the topics you discuss, you and your father. When I was doing some research for my initial conversation with your father, I found a lot of podcasts of her promoting her book, and it's the exact same type of a knowledge. Like she's trying to really express some of the detrimental and occult and satanic links for feminism. Right? It's interesting,
Well,
but
that's it's very peculiar because the husband was very disrespectful to me when I was on the podcast and attacked me every single time I referred to God and my father being the structure of my life and my home until I get married, and tried to paint me out to be a feminist because of my Christian values and submission to the natural order of what God says I should do until I'm married, which is follow God and my father. And so, I can't imagine that the book actually outlines what we are actually talking about, because then their actions spoke louder than their words, and a lot of people were very displeased with what they did with me on the podcast.
It's part of it's, and I don't know them personally. It's part of Andrew Wilson's thing. I don't think he knows how to not disagree with people. I think he is Mr. Adversary. It's like blood sport debating. I'm not a fan of the style. I think more can be learned from a reciprocal conversation as opposed to an adversarial. It just turns into them trying to like substantiate their impression of themselves. I'm the smart one. I'm smarter than you. It seems really vacuous. But no, just content wise, her book is definitely kind of within the realms of the origins of it, just with as in terms of history.
Okay.
But yeah, I was wondering that myself. So we're coming to the end here. We usually go for an hour, and we have no questions. So before we go,
there is actually one question.
Is there? Bring it up. Absolutely.
Yeah. Someone said, this is Radius. He said, question, what's one thing that young men can do today without the requirement of money to help bring traditional masculinity back to the West? And he said, character is key.
I mean, my answer would be coming back to Christ. I mean, I didn't know what masculinity. I didn't know what good and bad were. I thought good and bad were constructs. I was morally relativistic. I believed in moral relativism, your truth and my truth, and circumstances are complex. Like I had a very secular view. I couldn't know what masculinity was until I knew about Christianity. And when I started to immerse myself in the biblical narratives, when I started to learn more, read commentaries, listen to different priests and preachers, I started to really understand at a core concept what it means to be a good man. And knowing that one of the key components is being a strong man, 100%. Asserting yourself and your dominance is a key aspect of it. Or your competence, not to make it bad with asserting your dominance, but asserting your competence is very crucial.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense for sure. I'm not a man, so I can't give the answer of what men should do. But yeah, it makes sense.
But again, Kaysha, this was a great conversation. I sincerely very much enjoyed speaking with you. We'll get you on again in the future. Do you want to tell my audience where they could find you and your work?
Oh yeah, so I do host a podcast that's affiliated with Lindo TV. It's called The Karis Project. That's Karis. Yes, like the Greek word Haris. The Karis Project. And also, if you want to find me on X or whatever, it's Kaysha, Kaysha, like there, RIC. And you can get the link in the description for any of the other social medias that I have. I have Instagram and Twitter, and yeah. So yeah, but thank you again for having me on, JP. It's been awesome. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's definitely important discussions for people to have and for them to understand. We do need to come back to God 100%. And, things are difficult for people, but, we have to find a way to pull through and work together, because that's the only way that we're going to get anywhere going forward.
Amen to that. So I want to thank everyone for coming out and watching and interacting. I'm going to actually upload this in its entirety directly to X, because I know something's off with my viewership. I'm not prone to paranoia. It's off by probably like a factor of like 4. Like it's 4 times less than it usually is. So I'm going to be uploading the whole video, but I do want to thank everyone for coming out and sharing and interacting, and I'll see you guys next time. This is Dumb the Wiser. My name is JP Berg. Cheers.